Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Yvonne. I am the Training Institute Manager for the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to our webinar titled The Impact of Adultification on Child Survivors of Trauma with an Emphasis of Children of Color. We are so happy that you are joining us today. I'm going to just remind you, if you have a question, we have the chat box ready, and Brecken is our chat box monitor today. She will make sure to share your questions with our presenter. Also, I see that many of you are introducing yourselves, telling us where you're calling us from. So welcome, everyone. We are getting ready to start. For those of you, that don't know the National Resource Center, we are a national technical assistance provider, and our mission is to strengthen and transform efforts to end domestic violence. We provide a lot of technical assistance, training. We do a lot of webinars, workshops, keynote speakings. We have a lot of resources that we develop free of charge. We do a lot of things, and we're able to do this because we have an amazing team. And I want to just say hi to our team behind the scenes. We have Brecken, we have Justine, Joe, and Patty. We're all working together. I want to also welcome and thank you, our captioner, Lisa, today. As you can see, the NRCDV has many key initiatives and special projects. One of them that we are extremely proud of is Bonnet, our online library. Bonnet is a source of great information. Anything that you want to learn about domestic violence and its intersections, you can just go in there and find the information that you need. We have the Domestic Violence and Evidence Project, Building Comprehensive Solutions, Prevent IPV, Tools for Social Change. That's another great source of information. And of course, the Domestic Violence Awareness Project. We are extremely proud of this special project. We also have the Runaway and Homeless Youth and Domestic Violence Relationship Violence Toolkit. So all of these are great sources of information that are free for you. So who we are and what do we do? Well, a great way for you guys to get to know us more, it's our NRCDV stance. We developed this stance back in 2016, and this is what guides our work. I'm going to read it for all of you. We try to do this every single time. We have a webinar, we have an in-person presentation. We want for everybody to get to know the NRCDV. We stand with individuals and groups who have been targeted, degraded, threatened, or marginalized because they're Native Americans, people of color, immigrants, women, Muslims, LGBTQ, or people with disabilities. We stand against white supremacy, racism, misogyny, anti-Semitism, homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, and all other forms of structural oppression. We stand with survivors of domestic and sexual violence, especially those most vulnerable and with limited access to services and protections. We stand together in celebration of the rich diversity of people in this country and the vitality and strength they bring to our communities and society. We stand with those who embrace self-care and community connection as necessary and powerful for social change. We stand with other activists and organizations who continue to work passionately for gender, racial, economic, and social justice for all. And this is who we are, the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence. So I want to introduce to you our presenter today. I'm extremely proud and excited to welcome Jacqueline Miller. What can I say about Jacqueline Miller? Oh my God, we met years ago. She's an advocate, survivor. She is just an overall inspiration. She is the founder of the Healthy Actions Intervening Responsibly, H.A.I.R. With over 20 years in the domestic violence field, she shares her knowledge and expertise on the impact that domestic violence has on children's health, understanding trauma, including ACEs, and the impact adultification has on children's lives and their well-being. She is also a member of our Domestic Violence Awareness Project. She's a steering committee member, and we have collaborated with her in a numerous of projects for the NRCDV. So, Jacqueline, welcome to our session today.
Well, thank you, Yvonne. I'm so delighted and thrilled to be here to present on this topic. I want to thank you and the entire NRCDV team and all of your work that you've done to coordinate and pull this together. I just want to thank you. Thank you all once again.
Jacqueline, it seems like
I'm grateful.
Yourself?
No, I'm not muted.
We can get her back.
Yvonne, we can hear Jacqueline just fine.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Jacqueline?
Yes, I'm here.
I can hear you. Let me double check in the other room and see if you're coming through. It looks like the captioner can hear me. Do you want to say a few words? People in the public chat, can you guys let us know if you can hear all right?
Okay, I'm hearing people say they can hear me.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so thank you all for letting me know.
Yeah, I'll just say, Yvonne, if you could still hear us, if you want to hang up and dial back in. I'm not quite sure what's going on with your phone, but we'll continue on.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you all so much. Once again, thank you all in the chat box for letting me know that I am heard. That's awesome. And so, again, I'm just so grateful for each of you who are attending and joining this webinar today. I, as Yvonne said, have been doing work in this movement, in this field for 20-plus years, and I find that as I'm sharing my lived experiences, that I do continue to experience some challenges at times in terms of sharing my story and standing up. And I think the most challenging part of that, as far as standing and speaking up, is that I'm actually here to tell the story. There were so many times and events and occasions and incidents where I did not think I would be here to even tell the story. So it is sometimes challenging to share the story, as I believe some of the, I would say, consequences or results that I'm living with today, or things, situations or conditions that I live with today is a result, in fact, direct result of some of those traumas of my lived experiences during, and I am a survivor, adult survivor of childhood exposure to domestic violence. And so what Healthy Action Intervening Responsibly does is, through conducting trainings and webinars and community engagement activities, H.A.I.R is designed to raise the awareness of issues that have negative impacts on children and their childhood, and with an emphasis on Black girls. And what I have done is, I took a look back into my own childhood. Is there have been so many campaigns about looking at or speaking to, or words you would give to your younger self. And I actually sat down and still occasionally do those activities for myself, and wanted to really see how can services and outcomes be improved for children, and particularly for Black girls. And so H.A.I.R emphasizes the importance of healthy interventions, and we know that not all interventions are healthy. And so that is the focus, and that is our goal. H.A.I.R also mobilizes family, communities, and faith leaders, as I've done a lot of trainings with faith leaders before on abuse and how to recognize abuse and how to sensitively respond to their congregants or their faith community, as well as educators and law enforcement, to intentionally invest time and action steps towards improving service delivery and trauma-informed approaches while working in partnership with Black girls. And I've seen this line right here in a couple of places, and I just really want to uplift it, that Black girls that are emphasized and unsilenced and made visible. So today, our learning objectives are, we're going to explore adultification, its intersections, and the impact. We're going to understand how experiences of childhood trauma can impact development and decision making. We're also going to examine the ways in which family traditions, cultural norms, and layers of oppression impact children's experiences of violence and healing. And we're also going to shed light on the impact of structural and institutional racism on children of color. And finally, we're going to identify tools and sources for creating a plan to address adultification. And before I move on to my next slide, I'd like to give 3 examples of quick examples and snapshots of my lived experience, stories from my childhood. One of them I'll share is I had a babysitter when I was about maybe like 10 years old, and it was one day that her teenage son, he was 15 years old, was in the house with me. My babysitter had gone into her yard doing some work. She came back and found that his bedroom door was closed. She called out for both of us, and it didn't feel right when he had me in his bedroom with the door closed. He had on a house robe, and under that house robe, he was completely naked. And I wasn't sure of what was going to happen at that point or at that moment. So my babysitter called out to both of us, didn't see us, so then she busts through his bedroom door, and she looks at him and looks at me. She takes a look at him and snatches his robe off and see that he doesn't have any clothes on. He's completely naked once again. She grabbed a switch, began to whip him unmercifully. Then she grabbed it and she turned it on me. I was 10 years old, completely confused about what that meant and what had I done. I was not the one who closed the bedroom door. I was not the one who was completely undressed and naked. I was not the one who even, told me to get completely, to get undressed. However, she, punished me and whipped me for his actions. That was number one. Then another incident, a scenario, is that one of my relatives knew how sickly I was as a child with chronic asthma. This one particular day, I was having an acute asthma attack, and so I was completely out of my inhaler. Did not want to trouble my mom with that, knowing that she would have to get money and buy the inhaler again. So what I did, I just said I would, just try to take care of myself and be able to work my way through the asthma attack. The adult, knowing about this situation, put me on the phone with one of their friends, and the friend worked at a hospital, was a nurse, and told me that, okay, so I understand you're having an asthma attack. I have a way to get you an inhaler. And I was so happy. I thought that, yes, I'm finally going to get some relief. I got some help that is coming, and that will certainly help my mom, that she would not have to figure out how to get me an inhaler. Well, what happened was when I told the person, yes, I will be happy to get that inhaler, the adult person said to me, well, you know what, before you get off the phone, let me tell you what you need to do to get that inhaler. And I'm going to say exactly as she said it to me. She said to me, to get this inhaler, you need to let me eat you out. I was not aware of what that meant. I had not heard of that before. I didn't know exactly at all what that meant, but that's what she said to me. In order to get an inhaler, in order for me to be able to breathe and to be relieved from my asthma attack, well, let me tell you all, I was 12 years old when that was said to me. And then my final and third scenario of lived experience, one of those times I was having an acute attack. My mom had taken me to a local hospital to be seen by the doctor. One of the security officers who was on duty that night was kind of flirting with me, and had slipped me his phone number. So he did not know that my asthma was so bad that I was admitted that same night. As I was admitted in the hospital, the next morning he was doing his rounds, and he was doing his rounds on the peds floor. He comes to my door and looks in and says, you were so sick to be admitted. So he invites himself in my room. He closes my door. He removes my panties. And so I often wonder what could have happened differently, or how could I have been better protected, by adults that were around me and in my life. And so that brings me to this topic where even the studies and research is showing that Black girls are perceived to be more knowledgeable about adult topics and sex topics in particular than any other group or races of girls. And certainly, I look back at my own childhood, and I find that to have been very true based on my lived experiences, that those adults, I'm believing, assumed that I had some knowledge, awareness about those things that they were imposing on me, or at least some experience of them. And once again, I did not. And at that age of that last incident I just shared, the age I was at during the last experience I just shared, I was once again 12 years old. So as I do this work, I do it with thinking of how things and systems and approaches can be very different for Black girls. And studies are also showing us where services are improved for all children. For Black girls, for Black girls, all children benefit from those changes and the work that we do to improve the outcomes for children. When it's specifically focused on Black girls benefiting from that, all children actually benefit. So the national prevalence, as I've done this work over these 20-plus years, and as I've spent some time working on looking at and reducing homicide within, like domestic violence homicides, I find that still today, more than 3 women are murdered by their husbands or their boyfriends in the United States. We see that even based on the statistics, 2 million injuries from intimate partner violence occur each year, even as I've done work within the healthcare setting, and find that as I've done that work, that is not isolated incidents at all that is happening to our women, but that it is part of power and control. It is part of the coercive control where many of these incidents, these murders, these homicides, the injuries are truly taking place. And one of the things that, I stand with survivors. Many of these women are mothers. And what I've done, I've looked at over the lifespan or the span of my work and have seen and worked directly with survivors who are mothers. And there have been thoughts or opinions, or there have been people have thought that, oh, they just don't care, women, they don't care what happened to their children. They're more committed to their men, or they're more, looking out for their boyfriend. They don't care what happens to the children. But I found that not to be true at all. I stand with survivors. I stand with, survivors who are mothers. And what I found in my work is that when a mother learns the impact that violence and abuse is having on their children, they are more likely to make a phone call, call a hotline, leave and go to a shelter, get an order of protection, get an injunction for protection. They have, based on my experience, my work experience, is that they have and they do reach out for help to protect their children. They do have in place protective factors on behalf of their children, whereas the opposite has often been believed or even said of survivors who are protecting children. So I want to also say growing up in a violent home may be a terrifying and traumatic experience that can affect every aspect of a child's life, growth, and development. And my particular interest and passion and commitment to this is to raise the awareness and to be part of elevating survivors' voices that, yes, they do want to do what is best for their children. They have been doing it. They have been utilizing those protective factors as well as the services and resources that are available to them. And often when they're deciding to make those phone calls or deciding to go to a shelter, their children are at the forefront, and they're making those decisions with their children in mind. So the number of children exposed to violence, family violence in particular, when I first started doing this work, it was about 13 million. And now to see that this number is growing, and certainly, based on the population, We can say, the number of children that are born each year. But what we see is that 30 million children, American children, will be exposed to family violence by the time they are 17 years old. And that 1 in 4 American children will experience violence between their parents, caregivers. That's about 20.5 million children. So what we're talking about today and addressing is who grows up more quickly and why. And the terminology for that is adultification. What I've learned over this past year that as I've conducted these trainings across several different organizations whose staff have brought me in to talk with their staff about this issue, adultification, spousification, and parentification are terms that are used interchangeably. So you might be familiar with a term different or other than adultification, but adultification is a premature empowerment of a child to assume authority, acquire knowledge, and function in roles associated with adults. Okay, so, and then when it comes to parentification, that one is specifically where children are put in the parent's role, whether it's caring for siblings or caring for the household or going out there to make money to help to pay the bills. And spousification is used when occurs when a child is meeting the emotional needs of an absent parent. And where we see this a lot, or where I've been hearing a lot of scenarios centered around, is where parents have divorced, and now that a parent is absent or a spouse is absent, that child tries to meet and fulfill those needs of that absent spouse. And what we're seeing is more trying to meet those needs emotionally of the absent parent. So decision-making ability. Now, when it comes to making decisions, and I challenge, every adult, and including myself, when we come upon a situation or time to make a decision, just think about for a moment all the things that you rely on, you utilize, you need to make what you would consider to be a good, sound decision. Well, let's take a look at this. Decision-making includes skills, knowledge, resources, social networking, which helps to manage relationship with others, to play various roles, to perform behaviors, and to react to environments under the familiar culture or the climate of a larger society. So just think of that in terms of now children and how things are for them in terms of making decisions where they are playing an adult role or where they are in an adult situation. Are they likely to have the skills that an adult has, the knowledge, the resources, social networking? Are they likely to really have those things in place at the same rate or level as an adult? Most folks that have participated in my trainings all say no. Most likely a child has not developed these skills as we adults have. And even as an adult, I find myself that I'm still building skill. I'm still learning resources. I'm still learning how to manage. I'm still building a social network. So let's think about that in terms of children and their ability at the same rate as an adult to be able to, as we would want, to make good decisions. Now, this next piece is about subjective aging, which means it means where someone, how they perceive their own age or their own development or where they are compared to their own peers. There are some adolescents who feel like they're pretty grown. They feel like they're grown because of the things that they're taking care of in the household or the family, or the responsibilities that lie on their shoulders, or the things that they're carrying on their plate. Sometimes you might even hear them say, well, what you're going through compared to what I'm going through is absolutely nothing. They have even said that concerning adults. Many of the young folks that I have spent time with and having conversations have clearly said most adults aren't even able to handle what I'm dealing with on a daily basis. Many adults, I know myself, I've never had anyone to die in my arms. I've never had a sibling to be shot down or die in my arms. I've never had someone in my community to be shot down and to die in my arms. Unfortunately, that's not the same experience of many of our youth today. Many of them have been exposed to such high levels of community level violence that, yeah, they can really talk about what it's really like to have to live through such incidents and experiences, unlike many of we adults. So let's take a poll. I would like for you to share your thoughts on what do you think might accelerate subjective aging, which once again is someone's perception of how old they are, and what those situations might be that could surely elevate their thoughts on how old they feel like they are based on their experiences. So we'll take a minute to see if you want to share your experience of what you think might lead to subjective aging. Thank you all for your input. Thank you. I see those coming through.
We have a lot of great comments. I'm just going to read some of them. Maybe whether you have a grown-up who can absorb some of those grown-up experiences for you, parents' expectations of children's behaviors, family dynamics, roles, economic, communities where they live, systemic issues, not understanding adolescent development patterns. Somebody wrote, two of you share culture, the birth order, oldest taking care of the younger siblings, and we see this a lot, society, media, peers, lack of guidance, negative stereotypes in the media, and you talked about that, Jacqueline. Discipline, punishment in schools, institutionalized racism, and I'm so glad that we've seen a lot of talk about, not just you, Jacqueline, but in the chat room about racial equity. That's wonderful. Stress, parents shifting adult responsibilities onto children. But there were many, and they keep on going.
Great, and please feel free to continue sharing your thoughts or anything that comes to mind. Go ahead and share those with us, and all of those are exactly on it. That's exactly what many adolescents and children are experiencing that might be accelerating the subjective aging thoughts and processes for them. So please, again, continue to share in that box. So here's an example. One teen said this: sometimes I just don't believe how this school operates and thinks about us. Here I am, a grown man, and I take care of my mother and have raised my sisters. Then I come here, and this know-nothing teacher treats me like I'm some dumb kid with no responsibilities. I am so frustrated. They are trying to make me something that I am not. Don't they understand? I've been a man longer than she's been a woman. I better be a man before I lose my life on these streets. And I have, for some years, without really even understanding, have heard many make that comment about, I better be a man, I better be a man before I lose my life or before I'm taken down in the streets. I've heard them say that, not really understanding that. I learned that there was a project in a large city that was like an art project with children. And so those children were asked the question, what did they think about growing up? What did they feel about their futures? And so what we saw through the arts and also just over a period of time, whereas I don't know if any of you recall this, but I certainly do, there was this like theme or like this campaign of when I grow up, ... I want to be or I want to do, or I plan this or I plan that. But we saw some shift in that the narratives on that go from when I grow up, I plan to if I grow up. And so that is telling us a lot. That is giving us some insight on how many youth are feeling like and how they see their futures. And what it means to be growing up when it comes to like growing up in our society. Okay, so there's certainly lots of scenarios and stories like this, and where I've been doing a lot of trainings around this, I hear the participants saying, I'm aware of this, I am familiar with this, I just never knew there was a term for it. I never knew there was specific terminology for it, and many of those very participants would share their experiences within their own household. So what we do know based on this is that adultification for some is intergenerational. So let's look at real quickly the developmental implications. When children and adolescents perform adult-like roles, the experience can have unique developmental implications for them. And one of them we're just going to take a real quick look at is one of these disturbances on social emotional development. Okay, so we're going to highlight this disturbance. It is argued that experiencing social behavior and engaging in social interaction is vital during childhood development. We know that to be true. However, many children, for various reasons, and I think about this a lot, even in my current work and what I'm doing, is not all children are able to participate in or experience the social behavior that is crucial for their well-being, their mental health, and their development. And so as I take a look at this even more, I think about like after-school programs. I think about extracurricular activities. I think about community engagement activities. And again, not all children are afforded those opportunities. I'll just give a couple of reasons why, and I'm sure you can think of some as well, where a child might be living in an adultification situation, as many of you said on here in the chat box, due to economics. Well, you know, they're living in a single-parent home, and maybe not enough money is coming through the house to really take care of the needs of that household. And maybe that child, the parent is relying on them to go or to work a part-time job just to help pay the light bill or to pay to help for some of those like food expenses in the household. And as a result of that individual going to work a part-time job, they aren't able to go for tutoring programs or to go to after-school programs or to participate in sports activities that they might be really, really interested in, or to engage in community activities, engage in community events and stuff and such, which will help to build their social behaviors, all because, and I've heard someone say this recently, they need to go home to take care of their siblings, to put on dinner, to start dinner for their mom, and to start combing hair, and to help their siblings with their homework. That sounds like maybe it's a very typical scenario that I'm sure many of you have come across at some point, and you might be helping a family to navigate through some of those things even right now. So adultification can be a contributing factor to social isolation. I want to share this, how, and to my surprise, I learned of how severe social isolation really is. Now, this was shared, this is back from in 2000, and, you know, we can just think about, you know, the years later that it is and what these numbers potentially look like now. Social isolation, the deaths that have occurred due to someone not having access to education or fair education, or even it's attributed to, these deaths were attributed to low education, which once again can mean not having access to the level of education that was needed. Also, racial segregation led to these number of deaths. Low social support led to these number of deaths. The level of poverty. We know that poverty certainly can hinder folks from getting contact and connected with the services and resources that they really do need. They don't have even, you know, they may not have that bus card, or they may not have extra money to use for bus fare or cab fare to get to wherever they need to go. Also, income inequality is a big contributor to this, and area level poverty as well. So poverty just continues to show up when it comes to adultification. And so what I've also found is that where adultification has a great impact on children living in poverty, we also see that it can have an impact on children who are living in a working class or middle class household, and what that looks like. And I've heard of scenarios centered around this is where that individual is expected to volunteer or is put in positions and in situations where they are, and in fact, I know of a scenario where there's an adolescent, one of his parents is actually in prison right now, and that parent has resources to share or to give to their child for the purpose to go out there and find an attorney and I'm going to make sure I don't share anything that might disclose the scenario of the situation, but where that teenager is also given access to his dad's vehicle so that he can get around. And really, he doesn't have a valid driver's license, but he's provided these resources to help his dad, who's actually incarcerated, and then the dad expects him to report back to him, to come and visit him, and to have conversations with family members to help him with his case. I'll just say that. And so that teenager feels really important. Actually, he says, I feel like I'm a man. I'm learning a lot of things. I have information and knowledge that a lot of adults don't even have. So that is just one example. And so what I found is that social isolation is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes per day. Now, take a look at this. Social access is crucial. Unfortunately, children who are experiencing social isolation through adultification may not have access to trusted adults. And as I said earlier about extracurricular activities and community activities, and so that puts them, so many of them, in situations where they are isolated and don't have an adult that they can trust or that they can, that can help to increase their safety or increase safety nets within their communities as well. So the power of imitation. Imitation is very, very powerful, as you all know. I'm sure you know when it comes to children. A child's enthusiasm for imitative behavior prompts parental attention and interaction and provides a mechanism for transmitting appropriate cultural and social behavior. And we're going to go into what that means even further here. So I came across a study that was conducted amongst preschoolers. There were about 143 to 4-year-olds who were involved in this study. And so there was a pretend grocery store that was set up. On here you see the number or the types of food that was on the shelf and the number and variety of those foods that were provided on the shelf. These 3 to 4-year-olds were told they were going to go grocery shopping and that it was for pretend, and that they could buy whatever they wanted, that they were encouraged to go in and just, freely pick up things off the shelf and put them in their grocery basket. Well, this was the results. You see the number of things, the percentage of things that were purchased by those preschoolers. And the things that stood out to me and that was the most striking is I looked at the number of children who bought cigarettes. 50% of them identified the cigarettes by the product type and as well as the product name. In fact, the report had shared that one of the children, it was noticed that a 4-year-old had pretended called his spouse on the phone and said, I got you, and he said the specific brand of cigarettes and named it and called it out and says, oh, and by the way, they have buy 2, get 1 free, and says, well, I got you 3 packs. And then a great number of 61.7% bought alcohol, of whom 58.1% identified it by the type, being beer, wine, or booze. So these children were very, we believe they were aware of what they were picking up. They had on some level some experience of picking these things up. And let me go up the list a little bit. I looked at the 17.5% who bought ibuprofen and the specific name of that. And I then began to think about, what are they learning or how are they learning to deal with pain or how are they learning to deal with trauma or stress. And that's the one thing I think that really stood out to me and it was very thought-provoking is what are they learning about stress? What are they learning about conflict? What are they learning about pain? And so how much of that truly might they be relying on or internalizing when it comes to some of the conflicts and stress that they might be dealing with for themselves? Okay, so the next thing is after leaving the grocery store, these children return to the pretend living quarters. 71% played with cigarettes, alcohol, and so what they found is that as the children went back to their homes and was watching a movie, the more violent that movie was, the more likely the children were to play with or use the alcohol or pretend. Look at real quickly the experiences that can impact childhood. It is well documented how poverty, which continues to come up, and having a lack of support can be sources of stress for children. Look at these things around the wheel: growing up in foster care, kinship care, having an incarcerated parent, parental substance misuse, and being removed by Child Protective Services. I want to just go real quickly on being in kinship care. There was someone I spoken with recently that talked about the burden of being in kinship care, which that child was the person that was trying to keep the family at peace and keep the family together, because the adults were in that family were blaming each other that that child had been removed from the home. So it was the child trying to bring peace amongst the adults in the family. So family traditions. There's a strong sense of family identity that involves fulfilling family responsibilities and parental expectations. The collectivistic cultures, there's often a strong sense of family obligations. And the next thing is discriminated related stress, unequal pace of acculturation between adults and parents, parents and children, which means children are not necessarily adjusting to a new environment, a new cultural at the same rate and level as their parents are. There are stresses of adjusting to a new cultural environment, and they're not at the same pace. Sometimes adults might overlook or don't realize that children are not, adjusting to these changes as quickly as we adults might have. And there are times that sometimes adults might expect a child to adjust fairly quickly because we believe that, well, you don't have anything to do but just go to school and just be a child, not realizing that children sometimes experience stress as well. And one of those stresses for a child can be non-acceptance by the host culture. The other thing is stress related to immigrant families adopting to new environments. Children are expected to play more dominant roles. Perhaps the child is taking on parental responsibilities. Also, certainly, the expectation to honor your family. And I know that this is a big one. I saw this in medical settings where I was working some years ago. Language and cultural behaviors that require children to act as translators for their parents. That is a big one as well, which exposes them to information that they probably really should not have access to. Children of the dominant culture. There was a study that was conducted that involved, that included Caucasian and Asian students in parentification inventory. The Asian students disclosed that they were expected to more along the lines of parentification, caring for siblings that they didn't particularly desire to do and didn't feel they had the skills to do so, but they did it out of being told that there was an expectation of them to stick together or to help each other. Caucasian students, interestingly, said that they benefit from adultification because it gives them exposure to running a business or to doing adult-like things to give them more like insight on what they wanted to do for their future and how they wanted to live their lives when they became an adult. But the interesting and the key thing in that is where what they talked about, experiencing adultification, the way they benefited from it, was because they were provided the resources to go along with their experiences or the positions or the roles that they were put in. Okay. The next thing is, and yes, absolutely, going back to some of those things about, like the things that children are often exposed to, a lot of things that I think about, even my childhood, that there were play like candy, cigarettes, there were candy type of things that were more so like for adults, and they made like the child version of those things, and so that's something key I wanted to add to that as well, as we move forward. Again, some of those things that are made to be, that are adult-like, but are kind of made to be and modified like the childlike version of it, and thinking of it as it to be innocent, like there's nothing wrong with it. But we see a lot of, and we're seeing a lot that's playing out in society, how those things are very harmful for children. So the next thing is we're going to go into looking at how adults view children and their behaviors. And once again, I came across many of these things that were somewhat surprising and very, very, once again, disheartening. So neighborhood-related stress. When young people witness or experience violence on a daily basis, and I want to emphasize that because there are some youth and their families who experiences violence or the threat of violence on a daily basis. And what does that do? It can raise the possibility, and sometimes the reality in many cases, of that individual drawing end to the end of their life, or drawing nearer to the end of their life. I was talking with a parent at the end of one of the trainings that I conducted some time ago, and that parent talked about the stress that she's under every single day, being a single parent, which it felt like to her because her partner travels for work, but she feels like a single parent with the other partner not being there, and to basically give her son the daily script, or I'll call it the daily devotion. When you're in the car and you're driving it, keep your hands 10 and 2. 10 and 2. If anyone comes up to the car and asks you any questions, try not to move. Try to do this. Try to do that. And she tells him clearly, and so that's on a daily basis that she tells him about his behavior, about his tone of voice, and how he should address whoever it is. You make sure you say yes, ma'am. You make sure you say yes, sir. You don't move your head this way. You don't move your head that way. And then she added and said to me, he's big. He's a big guy. He's big for his age, and he can be easily mistaken to be as if he's in his 30s. We do see that showing up in adultification as well, where sometimes the size of a child, some adults take that and look at them as an adult. They don't even see them as a child. And so we know that for black boys, and you will see this coming down the slide in just a little bit, where black boys, depending based on their size, they are often perceived to be an adult, and where it's well documented, and interviews have been conducted with seasoned officers that they project and overestimate black boys' ages to be 4 to 5 years older than what they are. And in some cases, a black boy doesn't have to do anything but just stand up or walk forward and never open their mouth. However, they are perceived to be a threat. So the other thing is fear and the lack of safety on a daily basis. It can accelerate subjective aging by pushing young people into more adult-like responsibilities. There have been fathers. I did one presentation at a fatherhood conference, and fathers there talked about wanting to, and working with their sons along the lines of, get to experience manhood. I want you to know what it feels like. I want you to see what it's really, really like, because we don't even know how much longer you'll live, or we don't even know if you're going to get to be my age or get to be an adult. And because of many of those things, the social ills and that parents are seeing, which is a reality for many of them, it's more likely pushing their sons or their children into adult-like roles and experience. Homelessness and adultification. Many homeless youth left their family residence at an early age, and they now, as a result of that, are facing additional stressors related to the street life. And that can also contribute to the subjective aging. Some of these young folks that I've talked to have said, you know, they kind of like it's a prideful thing for them, or it's like they celebrate the fact that they've been able to survive on the street at the age of 16 years old. I've talked with someone, recently, she's like 32. She's lived on the street since she's 13. And she clearly said to me, there's nothing I haven't experienced. There's nothing I haven't seen. And she left home at the age of 13 years old due to some situations there, but she feels really proud about that because she's been able to survive on the streets. Also, when it comes to homelessness, when it comes to the lack of housing or the lack of space, that then in some situations it can cause a lack of privacy, whereas children might be hearing information or overhearing disputes amongst family members or amongst those who are cohabitating, and really give them information that they really should not be exposed to, or conflict between family members where they're hearing information or they're hearing disputes amongst family members that they really should not be exposed to. In fact, that is a question on the resilience survey that folks that participate in completing that, one of the questions asks them, have you ever overheard information or conflicts between family members? And then another question it asks is, have you ever been used or relied upon to bring peace amongst family members? And so many, I did a presentation at one of the jails here with the women's unit, and many of those women said that, yes, during their childhood, they were expected to bring peace and to mediate conflict amongst family members. So economics and poverty, we've already touched on a lot of this, but children living in poverty are more likely to live in high-crime neighborhoods, increasing their exposure to violence, live in low-resource communities, and so forth and so on. And you know what? I actually did hear the topic of gentrification come up recently. I'm currently in the Austin area, and so I heard that topic come up, and the conversation of what gentrification is doing to, you know, families and to the community and to students as well, and the harm and the damage that it's imposing on, you know, children, and particularly children of color. And I want to just call it out and put it out there. Let's be more specific, that the consequences and the results and the things that are happening to black girls or to black children in particular right now, it's like the population, the school population of black children, black girls is getting lower and lower. And so if you think about who are the resources going to go to, or who are the programs going to be designed for, or who's going to have access to those programs, I really got to say this, you are, and I so appreciate having this space and this space being created and held for me to have this topic and this conversation. But as I'm, you know, putting out there and raising the awareness of this topic through trainings and going around, you know, canvassing the community on raising and elevating this issue, this topic, I am almost finding if I include black girls in the title, I'm most likely not to get in. But if I just say children in general, as someone recently said in a training of mine openly, that, well, all children are affected by this issue. All children are experiencing this issue. And it's not just black girls. And that's that comment that was made. And so, you know, even bringing ourselves to the place that we are able to hear this, and I did find it surprising until I sat down and looked at the reality once again. But the work that we're doing with racial equity, the work that we're doing centered around equality and equity, it is still a little bit, it's still kind of surprising that challenge would be there. So then the next thing is, so stereotypes. Stereotypes is certainly big, and I can say that as a black woman. So many stereotypes. Like stereotypes are often result in black children not being afforded opportunities. I want to highlight this. I want to underline this. Not afforded the opportunity to make mistakes, to learn, to grow, and benefit from correction for youthful missteps, to the same degree as white children. Yes, and like that innocence has been removed. There's so much, many articles and lots of talk, and, you know, we certainly haven't found it all. We haven't arrived at, you know, our work is done, but there's so much more that needs to go into continuing these conversations, this topic, research, and so forth. But what does innocence look like? And not all children are afforded and given innocence. But black girls are viewed less innocent and are punished more harshly despite their status as children. A black girl will likely be told, you know better. You know better. And then the consequences that can follow that, and certainly those consequences are often harsh and immediate, which means they're not really given an opportunity to make mistakes and to learn and grow from those, because the punishment is often immediate. So this piece right here we're going into it included 325 adults from different racial, ethnic, and educational backgrounds who were recruited online to participate in this study in terms of how adults view children. And what was found was this, that adultification age brackets are in these three categories here. The ages of 5 to 9 years old. And what that really looks like between 5 and 9, like the expectation of, you know, like an 8-year-old, I was looking at the chores according to and based on developmental stage, where an 8-year-old would be based on their stage of development, to do some kitchen work or to begin washing dishes or so forth. But what I found, I'm going to actually take it back, that same chore or expectation of an 8-year-old is likely to fall on the shoulders of a 3-year-old. And so, and what I'm hearing that through even just conversations, like that 3-year-old is expected in some cases in some households is to get in that kitchen and to do certain things. And then when it comes to the next age bracket, the 10 to 14-year-old, what is the expectations on them and what some of those consequences look like, or some of those responsibilities for that individual's role, such as taking care of younger siblings. One 10-year-old said that she was taking care of her siblings. She had to get up at night and make the bottle for the new baby. Then she had to comb her siblings' hair first thing that morning because mom had to leave, leaving for work at 5 o'clock in the morning. And the expectations, once again, that she should be able to handle such things. And then the 15 and 19-year-olds, I was at a mental health summit this past weekend where a woman shared with me that someone was being interviewed post-high school for some internship opportunities. She was 18 years old, but when she was told that she would have to leave home to in order to take on that internship opportunity, she turned it down because she said, well, I can't leave home. My family relies on me to take care of the house. I got to help my mom. And actually, she said, especially with what's going on with immigration right now, I'm actually afraid to leave home. I don't think I should leave my family. And she turned it down. And then she decided that maybe college wasn't the right thing for her right now, because that interview to her was almost like telling her what's expected of her to attend and to go to college. And so she just turned it all down. So then the next thing is that black girls were described as being very mature. In this study, that is, by these 325 adults, very mature for their age, behaviorally, socially, but not academically. They were also said to be sophisticated and controlling at a young age, which is very, very interesting, how someone can even come to the place to say a 5 or 7-year-old is trying to get their way and being manipulative and controlling at a young age. And I said this at a recent training. I said, so are adults saying that a 5-year-old, blaming someone for being sexually abused or sexually assaulted, and saying that a 5-year-old has the capacity, the mental, emotional capacity, as well as the language to come on to a man, to look a certain way, to act seductively to dress a certain way and to move their body a certain way and to move their hips and all those things a certain way to the point that they can manipulate that person and get their attention and get what they want and cause these things to happen to them. So once saying that and breaking it down like that, so many of the folks in the audience, you know, they really, really thought about it. So this is what we're saying, and that we think 5-year-olds, 7-year-olds are really capable of. So the misinterpretation of black girls' outspokenness is often associated with the stereotype of black women as aggressive and dominating. And yes, we hear this all too often. We see this in so many articles that are found in print and online, scenarios that are happening in the community. We see a lot of this that just continues to go on and on and on, and how actually they're seeing black girls as many women and handling them as such as well. Black girls are often treated as if they are willfully engaging in behaviors typically expected of black women. Black children are rarely perceived, and once again, that's these adults, these 325 adults, this information sparks from that. Black children are rarely perceived as playtime or often severely punished for exhibiting normal childlike behaviors. Adultification contributes to disproportionality in school discipline outcomes and harsher treatment by law enforcement as well. The Supreme Court has time and time again.
Before you go into this slide, sorry, Jacqueline. We have a great comment. I don't know if you were able to read it, but I wanted to list it, and it's Corina, and she says that she has talked with kids who were adultified through domestic violence, where children are forced into situations they shouldn't be because of the violence. This is really hard, she says, though, because this often gets interpreted as the victim, usually the mom, is somehow equally or even the sole person to blame. One of the consequences is that the children are separated from the mom. This has specific implications for communities of colors because of implicit bias and stereotypes. And I'm sorry that I interrupted you, but I thought it was such a great comment. We have such great conversation in the chat, and I wanted for you to hear it.
Well, I'm so glad you did, Yvonne. I'm so glad that you pointed that out, you know, because it's like once I'm on, I mean, this topic means so much to me, and once I get started, I get going. So please, feel free to bring out any of the others. I so appreciate that, and thank you for your comment on that. That's very, very powerful, and yes, very, very true that, you know, children living in abusive homes certainly can be adultified and put in those roles and expectations, and also that some children might take on that role themselves, not necessarily their parent putting in those expectations on them, but how they themselves, you know, wanting things to get better or to be different, might truly take on a lot of those roles for themselves. Yeah, and I can think about several examples.
Thank you, Jacqueline.
I'm sorry?
Yes. No, I was just thanking Corina and you.
Yes, thank you, Corina. That is absolutely true. And I mean, that just takes me back even to, like, for myself, you know, I took on the role and responsibility of trying to, you know, figure out how I'm going to get this inhaler, you know, without worrying my mom with it and expecting, you know, her to figure some things out. But yeah, I can figure it out. I got to figure it out. And even got to the point where trying to protect my mom and relieve burdens from her is I could easily mask or hide the fact that I was actually having an acute attack. There were so many times. So I became really skilled at that. So thanks, Karina. That's amazing. And so the Supreme Court, we see this well documented from 2005, 10, 11, 12, where the Supreme Court has ruled that children should not be treated as adults. However, it continues to happen in our criminal justice system that children are not necessarily treated as adults. We know that there are various places all over this country where children are housed with adults in prisons, and we know that some of the consequences, some of the results that children would then live with as they are housed with adults and treated as adults within the criminal justice system. So what this leads us to is that one size does not fit all. And as I already alluded to this earlier, that one study demonstrated that black boys were perceived as older and likely to be guilty. Once again, before they even open their mouth, they are likely to be determined guilty. And again, those officers who were interviewed and asked, certain questions about working with black teens, that they overestimated their ages by 4 to 5 years than what they were. So the next thing about, and I'm very, this is another one of these topic areas that I'm very, very passionate about, leadership development. When teachers perceive perceptions of students as adult-like, is known, very much known, to interfere with providing black girls leadership development opportunities. And what we've heard throughout here and there, and I would even say back when I was in school, that teachers would see a black girl as being assertive or being outspoken, as being aggressive and dominating, and then make a determination that that person was not a good fit for a leadership or a mentoring opportunity because they felt that they didn't have the skills, they didn't have the discipline, they couldn't behave, they didn't have the mannerism, they were going to get there and embarrass them. And what that does, it can hinder and interfere with those students or those girls being given access to these type of programs and mentorship opportunities. The next thing is, so looking at the risks, all of the risks, those risk factors that we've just covered and that we looked at, and I'm sure many of you can probably think of so many more to add to this. In fact, I've updated this and updating this for 3 times now to include, topics on equity and looking at what that means, what that looks like in terms of this, and looking at leadership for black girls and what does that mean, and looking at, the work and stuff that's being done around the school, the pipeline work. And so there's so much more we can do to really dive deeper into this particular topic. So we're going to go and move on into looking at the resilience. And so we start with the guiding principles, like child safety is our ultimate priority. Then we're looking at the well-being of mom or the primary caregiver. I remember when I first started doing this work some 20 plus years ago, one of the first things I saw was safety of the mom can equal, a child is safe when a mom is safe. And I found that to be very true, and I still think about that even today. Child safety, it works and overlaps with the safety of the mom, and that the mom's safety, is the mom is considered to be one of the major and big, or having a relationship with and being connected to the mother is one of the major protective factors, as well as building resilience, is when a child remains with a non-offending or non-abusing parent rather than separating them from them. The next thing is creating opportunities for engagement. So these are our 3 guiding principles that we're working from. We're looking at resilience, that resilience is not something that you either have or you don't. It is a human capacity, and it can be developed in anyone. I know that for like myself and others who are looking into like building resilience, based on, I know my ACE score. If you don't know your ACE score, I encourage you to get to know it. But I know my ACE score, and ACE stands for the Adverse Childhood Experiences. And I consider my score to be pretty high, but it is those areas that where I'm building resilience in. And what I've learned is that adversity doesn't necessarily cause damage and harm forever, but that you can recover from it, that resilience can be built. And many people have talked about their adverse experiences is what really led to them having empathy and developing empathy for others, and that they've gained more from those adverse experiences. I would say, such as myself, I've learned more and gained so much through those adverse experiences, and I am learning. I'm in the process of learning and developing and, being recreated through my adverse experiences. So damage is not forever. So the next thing is factors which can promote resilience: relationship with family members, immediate environment in which they live, life events can promote resilience, helping the child improve his or her self-esteem and self-efficacy, and altering the child's perceptions of or exposure to the risk of harm are parts of things that can promote resilience. And I think this is an individual thing. It's, for the individual to be given space, space held for them, created for them to really talk about those areas, those experiences, those life events, and what resilience really means for them. I know resilience sometimes is from a cultural aspect. Some people the things that they might rely on or utilize from their culture can be like prayer. Some people are spiritual. Some people, do more like grounded to the earth types of activities. So it's really important to listen to the individual and to hear what their needs are, which is what we know equity is. And I thought about, and I began to dream, what if people really listened at what a Black girl needs? Are we really at the place? Are we really ready? Are we designing our programs and our organizations to be really ready to hear what a Black girl says she needs and talking about equity? So what we're going to go into is what that means is like creating a plan with all those things in mind. One of the first things we can do is reduce social isolation. Creative engagement can help to ease social isolation. Designing systems and activities to bring people into meaningful relationships. And I'll say this one thing is that one of the things that I live with today and have experienced and still working through, is a traumatic brain injury, and the cognitive piece of that. Sometimes the amount of time it can take me to say something, and so I look at that when it comes to equity. Would I really be heard when it comes to equity and talking about what I need, and talking about what would work best for me, and what that really, really looks like when it comes to these type of situations that any of us are living with and living under. And I think about, how challenging it is as an adult, and I really can't wrap my brain around too much, y'all. It's what that would really mean or look like for a Black girl, and if she would really be believed and heard. So part of the plan is to be non-judgmental, get to know the family or how they function. I did some work with the child welfare system on getting to know how family functions, and oftentimes the forms that these agencies uses within the child welfare agent systems don't have room for how your family functions. There's no room for narrative. It's more like a checkbox system. So is that the best practice? Also, have conversations about flexibility and inner strength that keeps them strong in times of stress. Adapt agency forms to be more open and flexible for use. Observe and assess for early signs of family distress and respond with encouragement and support. Once again, going back to how the family functions, what works best for that family, although we may not believe it, but people know what works best for them. We may think that our ideas are the best and they should just take them and use them, but we're going to work from the standpoint of, folks know what's best for them. Teach concrete skills to prevent stress, such as planning and goal setting, anticipating difficulties, problem solving, communication, and self-care. Also link parents with resources for stress management, such as exercise opportunities, relaxation techniques, and then use for the add on here is not on the slide, but one practical thing, like if there's a family you're working with or an individual you're working with, and you know that they're having financial difficulties and economic hardships and so forth, and maybe the family is looking to have the child to go and do some going to get a part-time job and to work. Well, how about we work with the adult on them maybe increasing their capacity, learning a new skill, developing new skills and so forth, and to look more into like what can we do to help adults become more employable, to relieve some of those hardships and burdens off their family, and then to work with the child to help the child to get to the place where their needs are met. I think about my mom so much. When it comes to equity, I think my mom was the one who created this whole thing about equity. I'll tell you how I say that and why I think that. Is when it came to my siblings in the household, considering my health, considering how terrible and bad my asthma was, there were certain responsibilities, chores, and things that my mom did not put on me as she did my siblings. There were certain things she did not expect me to do. There were certain times I was allowed to rest more than my siblings, or I was given access because of my health. So I'm working on that right now, talking with parents about how they can be part of and engage in the work of equity, like child equity. What does that really look like? And so that's something that's going to be coming up really, really soon. But yeah, engaging families and parents in equity work is just how I'm looking at it and talking about it. So here's some additional reading materials: the criminalization of Black girls in schools, childhood disruption of Disrupted. That's a great resource and publication as well. And then this study, research work that is available online, Girlhood Interrupted, the Erasure of Black Girls in Childhood. And I must say, again, it's very painful to see these and to read them because it's a reality for so many. So I thank you for attending today. Here's my email address, how you can reach me, my website. And I want to conclude with this quote by Audre Lorde, and it really resonates with this so much, and it's like it's from my soul. I have come to believe over and over again that what is most important to me must be spoken, made verbal, and shared, even at the risk of having it bruised or misunderstood. And again, I just want to thank you all for being here today.
Thank you, Jacqueline. This was an amazing presentation. So much, rich conversation on the chat, like I mentioned before. And we are going to, ask you guys, if anybody has any questions, please add them to the chat, and then we will make sure to share them with Jacqueline. Anything that you want to add, remember, you can reach out to Jacqueline directly. There's her information. Do we have any questions?
Well, actually, yes, I am looking at it, and these I thank
great.
you all for your time and sharing your comments and giving your feedback. It's so wonderful, to see those. I certainly appreciate that. And I'm definitely available for if you have any particular specific questions. And I want to just kind of share that, so my disheartened part is the challenges that it's taking, that I've experienced even just recently, on getting on the agenda to talk about this topic. And it's well documented, and I think and I hope that the case has been built. The case has been built when it comes to who's affected the most, who's been adultified, who's not allowed to be a child, who's not allowed to be innocent, who is treated harshly, who is more likely to be punished like immediately, who has all of the innocence and what comes with innocence and childhood removed from them. I would hope that I built that case. And so even building the case, it's very disheartening, because I'm a Black girl. I'm a Black girl. I'm just an adult Black girl. But it's like the toughness and getting on the agenda, it's like that's speaking to me. It's saying that we don't want to hear you. We don't want to know what it's like. We don't want to hear anything about innocence of a black girl, treated, harshly. Some other things that I know some of the research and the studies and stuff are showing is that black girls are perceived to be less needing of protection. There's one girl I was sitting with, she had shared with me that when she was in the 4th grade, one of her classmates had clipped her ponytail, and she was wearing 2 ponytails, and he clipped it. So she went to the teacher saying, that her hair had been cut, and the teacher says, okay, well, we'll talk about it later. Just go and have a seat. I need you to sit down. It's time to get back to class. And made her go and sit down, and so she goes home, and her mom is like, oh, what happened to your hair? She said, well, my classmate cut it, and I told the teacher. She didn't do anything about it, but just told me to go sit down. And so the mom, called the school, and they had a meeting and so forth. And the teacher's response or explanation in the meeting was that I thought she could handle it. And I'm doing this silence on purpose. I thought she could handle that. I thought she could handle that for herself. And unfortunately, all too often, black children, black girls are seen as being able to handle things on their own, that they don't need protection, don't need nurturing. One of the reports said less needing of comfort. And that is very, very disturbing. And, it's just like, that we're not again, getting this on agendas, getting this, raising the awareness, those opportunities. Let's bring it forth. And so I think about when it comes to areas and places across our nation that's being gentrified and who's affected by that. Well, we don't see a need to talk about the black girl issues. We don't see a need to raise the awareness in that. The population is dwindling down. We don't have many black girls in our school. There's not a need for that topic. So I wanted to put that out there of even sometimes how I'm feeling. But I also this morning I thought about, as I was preparing for coming online, I remember when I first started doing the work of DV, so many places and people did not want to hear DV. That was not a priority. That doesn't happen here. We don't have those issues. That is not a concern. That is not a thing where everybody fights. And so I'm coming to another topic, another phenomenon once again, where it's like standing, taking a stand, standing still, making movement, advancing, and speaking up, and certainly on behalf of my younger self amongst the other girls out there in our nation who are so needing and worthy of an advocate such as we on this line.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. We have one question for Mary Jo, and she would like to know more about equity. Is there information that I can look up, equality versus equity? And Mary Jo, I could tell you that there's a great resources, and one of them, I'm looking at it right here on my desk, is the forcebox.org. It has a lot of great materials, so you can start this conversation. Jacqueline, any ideas on, recommendations for materials on equity versus equality?
Well, exactly what you said, Yvonne, is exactly it. There isn't like any one place to go to, since this work is developing. This topic is developing, and actually the topic came out through a study that was actually done in the design for black boys. And with that being said, more information was actually coming to the surface about black girls. So that's really where it started at. And so when it comes to equality and equity, there are lots of things online. I would certainly say utilize NRCDV as a resource and things that are there. There is not, again, I think as I said, any one particular place to go to. And what you'll find is in some of those publications that I shared earlier, like Push Out and the Erasure of Black Girls, you'll find things embedded in there, and where links. So the topic is still like new and fresh, and I would say it's budding, and that we're learning. So does that make sense? I hope that is helpful. But to something more specific to adultification, right now it doesn't necessarily exist, but it's incorporated with intertwined with other topics, intersections.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. Let's see if we have any other questions. Great. Mary Jo is saying that she has been bringing this topic up a lot in staff meetings, and that is wonderful. At the NRCDV, we are committed to put racial equity, and use a racial equity lens whenever we develop materials, do presentations. So hands to you, Mary Jo. That's wonderful. We have a racial justice initiative that we're a part of that is 3 years old. We're doing the work internally. So I'm excited, and thank you.
Yes, that is awesome. I'll say thank you, Mary.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say thank you, Mary Jo. I'm very glad that you're elevating the topic and bringing it up. That is very, very wonderful. Someone at the summit this past Saturday said that they bring it up a lot. In fact, it was at a library that they're seeing kids come after school, and they're supposed to be accompanied by a parent, but they aren't. And so the policy there says, that the kids can't come in there without being accompanied. And so the staff member is, I'm going to be going in to do a training with hopes of helping to revise the policy and to bring some awareness and understanding, why after school, kids might be coming there after school without a parent, and is that really the safest option, is just to tell them they have to leave, or to let's make room for them and let's see if we can design something to help create a safe community for our kids.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jacqueline. Before we leave, I wanted to remind everybody about our One Thing campaign, and this was a campaign developed by our Domestic Violence Awareness Project, who's Jacqueline is a part of the steering committee. And this messaging was created to highlight the power of collective action. And if you want to do, put a campaign, you can access a free guide that our group put together. And this free guide is an action guide, contains shareable images, social media banners, posters, a community pledge, photo cards. So anything you need. Brecken, it's going to be putting the link to the action guide. I hope that everybody, is able to access it. We need to bring awareness not only during Domestic Violence Awareness Month, but throughout the entire year. And so that's a great resource for all of you. And also Brecken, thank you, Brecken, because she also put the link to several great resources that you can find on Bonnet. And again, downloadable and free for you guys. So thank you so much, Jacqueline. You've been wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I know that this was not enough time. We could have been talking and, about this topic the entire day, but hopefully we'll have some other sessions and we can continue the conversation. So thank you to you. Thank you to our captioner who's been working really, really hard, Lisa, and of course the NRCDV staff who always do an amazing job. And to all of you guys for joining us this afternoon, we want to invite you to answer a short survey and provide your feedback about this session, about the needs of your organization, about your personal development needs. So we want to thank you again for joining us. Remember, you're going to be receiving a follow-up email, and it will contain the link to the recording for this webinar and all materials that you would need. So thank you. That's the only thing. It has been wonderful, Jacqueline. We are so glad that you took the time to share your knowledge with us and with our participants. Thank you, everybody.
And thank you.
Of course, of course. Take care, and hopefully you guys will come back for our next webinar. Thank you, everybody.